Journalist and BS detector, Marcy Wheeler. From EmptyWheel.net, Marcy is here to break down the chaos, connect the dots, and probably drop a few F-bombs along the way. This is Empty Wheel Fridays on the Nicole Sandler Show.
Welcome to at the end of yet another week. And not only is it Friday, today is also World Mental Health Day. So it's a good day to remember to take care of yourself, to turn off the TV, shut off the computer for a while. The weekend's a great time to do that. Go look at the mountains or the ocean or whatever soothes your soul. Because right now, is it me? Is it just me? Or does it seem like things are really ramping up and getting even more chaotic and crazy than they've been?
It's not you. Okay. I was going to accuse you of being in cahoots with my spouse, saying I need World to take some time off because probably wouldn't be a bad idea. I just think, it's going to get this way. It's going to get this way because a lot of, Donald Trump is clearly unfit. I think today is the day he goes to Walter Reed for his second annual checkup. He was asked about his second annual checkup this year, and he boasted of passing a brain test back in 2020. And it's clear, he has been in decline for some time, but this week he has had some spectacular face plants, like when somebody asked him if he was going to suspend habeas corpus, and he thought said, he was talking about a human being, right. Or he is quite literally losing it.
Yeah.
When he said that he warned about Osama bin Laden, but also told Pete Hegseth about it, who was like a kid at the time.
Yes. Before 9/11 happened. Right. That he told Pete Hegseth.
Yeah. So he's delusional. And then there was that moment where Stephen Miller froze in the middle of invoking plenary authority. Do you have that?
I do. This was scary. I think his either his battery broke or he got disconnected from whatever powers him. But yeah, this happened. Yeah, you ready? Here, let me just
go ahead.
You've called the district judge's ruling blocking the deployment of National Guard in Oregon illegal insurrection. Does the administration still plan to abide by that ruling?
Well, the administration filed an appeal this morning with the Ninth Circuit. I would note the administration won an identical case in the Ninth Circuit just a few months ago with respect to the federalizing of the California National Guard. Under Title 10 of the U.S. Code, the president has plenary authority.
Stephen? Stephen? Hey, Stephen, can you hear me?
So I don't think that anybody that he lost, he couldn't hear. I mean, I don't know what. I think somebody shouted in his ear, "Shut up."
I actually don't think that's right. I don't think that somebody was trying to prevent him from announcing a takeover. I honestly, people need to remember that even though Donald Trump and Stephen Miller have no normal human emotions, they nevertheless lost somebody that normal humans would call a friend, somebody that normal humans would say they loved, somebody who is absolutely critical to their political success, who probably made the difference in putting Donald Trump in the White House. Yeah. And so in Charlie Kirk is who I'm talking about. Yeah. And Miller, this latest ratcheting up is Miller's response to the killing of Charlie Kirk, right? And I, however inhuman Stephen Miller is, he still nevertheless must have some kind of PTSD, realizing that he too is mortal, that he can lose one of his most important political allies. And so, and same with Trump. Trump last summer, after the shooting attempt in Butler, melted down. He was useless for a month. He didn't go out every time he did. He looked like a basket case. I think that I am not claiming that Stephen Miller and Donald Trump have normal human emotions. They clearly don't. I am saying that nevertheless, the loss of Charlie Kirk is going to have effects on them. And I think the larger thing, both Stephen Miller's attempt to ratchet up things and this freeze, because Stephen Miller is not afraid to invoke kingship, right? He does that. He said, I want to get rid of habeas corpus. That is just as outrageous as saying plenary authority. Goes back to Magna Carta, right? So I don't think that he was trying to censor himself. I think he literally just froze.
Wow.
And so you've got Donald Trump, who is unfit, who is delirious. Stephen Miller is his gatekeeper for all the most outrageous things he's done. This week, we learned he's in charge of murdering the Venezuelans and occasionally Colombians in boats. Atlantic had a piece out yesterday saying he's doing that for propaganda purposes. He believes that by murdering people in cold blood, it helps him make a case that these people are dangerous. He is behind the invasions of all of these states. He is behind the Call Insurrection Act, which remember Trump was going to do on January 6th, and Stephen Miller is his tied to these far right extremists who wanted him to do that. And so it is Stephen Miller is at once, he has always had this authoritarian
streak. Propensity,
goal,
right?
Gotcha. Right.
Yeah.
But he is also he is able to wield the power he does because he is the gatekeeper to Donald Trump, and he has cowed Republicans. I would bet that 70% of Republicans would be happy to see the end of Stephen Miller because he's an asshole to them. Yeah. Right. He's an asshole to them going back a long time. And his policies hurt them. The unquestioning deportation process, not popular. The choice to deport farm workers is not popular because it's hurting farms. Yes. Tariffs, not popular, hurting. Donald Trump's policy is actually destroying Republicans, and so I think that most Republicans would be happy to see Stephen Miller out of here. He just has insinuated himself in a place where he's got fairly unchallenged authority, and Donald Trump increasingly delirious, Stephen Miller totally unbalanced in his own way. And that is background to what we're seeing. And by the way, Pete Hegseth, too. We've seen reports that Pete Hegseth is increasingly delirious and paranoid. And again, he had ties to Charlie Kirk. I mean, all these people lost something that normal people would call a friend. Right. If these people were were normal, emotional human beings, they would all be grieving. Instead, they are having these paranoid meltdowns. And it's affecting their competence. We saw the invasion of both Portland and Chicago play out this week, right? Yep. And Portland challenged their invasion, and a Trump judge said, no, you can't invade on these terms. Now, that's going to be today. We expect her ruling to be overturned today by the Ninth Circuit because there were two Trump judges on it. Now, but the premise here is interesting. So when Gavin Newsom challenged his invasion, he was like, "Look, there's big protests, but we've got it." And there, the legal case was, how big are the protests really? Right. And so DOJ's argument at least had good faith behind it. When Oregon challenged it, they basically said because one thing we know, right, about Oregon is Trump himself admitted that Oregon's governor was telling him things different than what he was seeing on TV. And we can point to things on Fox News that conflated events in 2020 with current events. Right. And so that's one bubble that Trump is looking through. There's a bunch of right-wing provocateurs in Portland who are close to Trump, and they're showing Trump an image of the violence that they themselves instigated. And so that's what Trump is seeing. There was an advertisement from Oregon's Republican Party. They used footage from Latin America a decade ago as if that was Portland. And so you literally have false claims about what's going on in Portland. And then when DOJ tried to make a case, they're like, look, there were protests in June. And the state was like, yeah, that was June. You can't say that you're deploying now to protect ICE when the protests now are 20 persons big.
Right. Right.
And so that's what Judge Immergut, the Trump appointee, that's what she said. And she was frankly aghast. She's like, this is unhinged from reality. Mm-hmm. Yes, you have to give the president a lot of deference, but this is frankly unhinged from reality. And she kept going. She kept saying, what is the evidence? And they're like, these two Truth Social posts. She's like, really?
Yeah.
And I'm not exaggerating here. I mean, literally. Now, as I said, we expect the Ninth Circuit to reverse her injunction. Mm-hmm. Because two of the judges are these Trump judges who are auditioning for the Supreme Court. One judge literally asked the DOJ's lawyer, he said, do you, and I'm saying this secondhand, I didn't follow it directly, but do you contest the evidence in Judge Immergut's ruling? And DOJ said, no, we do not contest the facts in Judge Immergut's ruling. And that should have ended it, because what Judge Immergut said was like, there's no evidence. There's no, like, DOJ has not been able to substantiate any of the things in Donald Trump's Truth Social posts. Right? There's Donald Trump's little fantasy world, and then there's what DOJ was able to substantiate. Nevertheless, it'll be that, they're going to reverse the injunction. I assume Oregon is going to appeal to the full Ninth Circuit. And then we're going to get into an interesting question of what to do when the president is batshit insane.
Right.
And I mean that quite literally. Like he is invading Oregon based off his own insanity, and an insanity that Stephen Miller is filtering for him, is creating for him.
Right. I think he's being gaslit. I think that Stephen Miller, probably the key one here, who's telling him outright lies, and he's believing it. And then he watches Fox and he sees 5-year-old footage, B-roll running in the background, thinking it's happening now.
Right. And then we have Chicago. And in Chicago, same thing, no big protests. In Chicago, you have this guy, Greg Bovino, who's sort of the Where's Waldo of abusive Kristi Noem events. He was the guy who brought troops to Governor Newsom's redistricting announcement. He was the guy who arranged the invasion of MacArthur Park in Los Angeles. Then he moved to Chicago and he started doing boat tours as if he straight out of Apocalypse Now. Uh-huh. He in the Chicago River. Mm-hmm. He started patrolling the streets of Chicago. I mean, it was all theater. And one point I made in the last week is, absent these this theater from Bovino, but Bovino, and we'll talk about the raid on the South Shore apartment, but he was also there. Okay. And that was filmed. That was deliberately filmed. I mean, first of all, it was the middle of the night, which a judge would not have approved. You had, strobe lights so that you could film it in the middle of the night. They rappelled down from a helicopter. They arrested a bunch of American citizens. And by the way, that was used by a judge to overturn a bunch of the detentions because there's already a protective order in place going back years about ICE going in and just basically taking out entire apartment buildings. But Bovino is really the bad guy in all of this. And he came in and he literally said, I'm going to start a shit show today. That was on September 27th. That was in advance. That was trying to create a pretext for invasion. Now, what's interesting is he said that to authorities, and they rolled out, they're like, we arrested 11 people today. And they were quite proud of that. They showed 2 guns that they had confiscated. And since then, of those 11, only 5 people were charged. Uh-huh. And of the 5 people that were charged, 4 have now been dismissed. Oh, wow. And the 2 guns in question were legal guns with a concealed carry permit. Okay. So they basically are, and then the woman that CBP shot last Saturday, she also had a concealed carry permit. And so they are now seizing the guns, legally held guns, from people that CBP is targeting. So first of all, Chicago like Chicago has this argument that there's a pretext, that they've come in and tried to create violence. And that's what they're arguing. They're also arguing, and the judge in this case yesterday, when she imposed an injunction, which of course has already been appealed, she said, this is retaliation. This is retaliation because you have sanctuary laws in place, and they are and JB Pritzker, who of course has been one of the two voices that's been very aggressive in combating Donald Trump. You don't happen to have the piece he sent to Jimmy Kimmel?
I do. Yes, I actually do.
Jimmy Kimmel is asking people in Chicago, any place being invaded, Chicago, Portland, Los Angeles, Memphis, if you're being invaded, send pictures to him of, or post it on social media, of how your place is a war zone. And this is JB Pritzker's entry, which got on last night.
This is J.B. Pritzker reporting from war-torn Chicago. As you can see, there's utter mayhem and chaos on the ground. It's quite disturbing. The Milwaukee Brewers have come in to attack our Chicago Cubs. We've seen people being forced to eat hot dogs with ketchup on them. And our deep dish pizza, well, has gone shallow. So it's a challenge to survive here in the city of Chicago, but there's no hellscape that I'd rather be in. Thank you.
So that was very funny.
It was funny. And if you're in one of those cities that's being invaded, do make a video, particularly if you've got dancing frogs behind you. Do
wait
make
a minute.
video.
Hold on. Yes, like this one. This is in Portland. Okay.
Because a lot of you don't know how to properly spell things, so it's just to clarify. Or undamn Pritzker, or undamn Pritzker.
So it's furries dancing outside the Portland Detention Center. I guess from yesterday. This was on TikTok. And they just showed some, I don't know who they are, National Guard or whoever they sent out there, just standing there watching them. I mean, they're not doing anything wrong, but they're dancing.
Yeah, and I mean, that's really useful to do, because in both of these places, they're like the violence, again, CBP has shot 2 people in Chicago, killed 1. And in both cases, the story that they told about those shootings didn't hold up. As I said, Chicago is arguing something different. Like California argued, we took care of the protests. Then Portland argued, the facts that the claims they're making about the need to invade don't match reality on the ground. Chicago's making that argument as well, but they're also, and they've pointed out, for example, how CBP keeps shooting people, and then the claims they make about those shootings don't hold up. They've literally in one of the hearings yesterday they had in the Chicago injunction. In the middle of the hearing, they're like, I just told you that of those 11 people arrested, one was a journalist, by the way, of the 11. But in the middle of the hearing, they're like, the 4th of those 5 people who were actually charged, the cases against him were dismissed. There's a video online of his quote unquote assault on cops. And what you actually saw was like 8 CBP officers chasing him, taking him out. He's neurodivergent, so of course he was going nuts, and beating the shit out of him. And they charged him with assault. He confessed that he had said to one of them, "I'm going to kill you," because he's neurodivergent, and talked to the cops, which he shouldn't have. But they nevertheless dismissed the case against him because it was clearly a case of CBP assaulting him. By the way, Bovino, who I just told you about, has a couple of weeks of bed rest, apparently, because he hurt his groin doing something. But one of the things Pritzker said is, look, Donald Trump has had it in for Chicago going back to 2013. Wow. And he showed, for example, that Trump was planning to invade Chicago in 2022 before he announced his reelection. He ran on invading Chicago. So he's very clearly showing that Donald Trump is invading Chicago out of animus. And it's a different argument, but it's an argument that is going to be, it's going to be closely contested. I don't want to say this is going to be easy, but I think it makes it clear that this is not about facts on the ground, and also makes it clear that, you know, Bovino and others have come in and deliberately tried to provoke violence. One of the things they pointed out, for example, is in one protest, you know, a bunch of cops, like they were using crowd control gas and stuff so often outside of the ICE facility that the actual cops were getting sick. Wow. In the response to that shooting in a different neighborhood last Saturday, when the cops showed up, they again used tear gas, and 27, they gave the number 27 Chicago cops got sick because of it. Wow. Because the Chicago cops were standing between CBP, who had just shot somebody. The other interesting thing. So the story about the CBP shooting, remember, it's this woman, Miramar Martinez, who was indicted today. This is one case that Chicago hasn't had to dismiss. But her attorney said in her detention hearing that so what DHS claimed was that it was this armed person, as if she was brandishing a gun at CBP, and so they had to shoot at her. That's not what they charged. They claimed in the charge that she rammed CBP's car as well as another guy, and so in self-defense they shot at her. Only one of the three people in that Tahoe, in the CBP Tahoe, which was unmarked, by the way. And so they can't charge it unless they can prove she knew they were CBP. They're claiming she was screaming at them, La Migra, which maybe she was. You know, certainly people in Chicago are warning others when ICE is in town. But the charge, I haven't read the indictment yet, but the charge itself doesn't reveal that CBP knew that she had, they claim, doxed a CBP officer. So this CBP officer, a kind of short black guy with dreads. Okay. And she identified sometime in advance that this guy had a YouTube. So they're claiming she's doxing him when he's got a YouTube clearly identifying himself as an officer with a gun. Oh. And they say, well, we had an intelligence thing out for her in advance of her being shot. And her attorney says it's quite clear from the one body cam that they turned on that she didn't ram them, the Tahoe rammed her. And that's what her car shows. Her car, like the damage on her car doesn't show anything that she could have done to them. And then they shot her 5 times. So then, of course, the neighborhood gets really angry because CBP has come in and started shooting people. And there are other details. For example, the Chicago cops version is that she called 911 and they responded to her. She called 911 within 4 minutes of the time that she allegedly rammed their car. So she rammed their car, they got out, they shot her, and she escaped to a nearby auto parts place and called 911. And Chicago cops were there within another 4 minutes. And then it took an hour for CBP or anybody else to come and grab her car. So the cops had to stand there protecting her car as a crime scene until CBP showed up, which took an hour later. What's important, though, is one of the posts of CBP officers attacking people 2 blocks from the scene of the shooting. Is that black CBP officer? And this was, I believe, Saturday after the shooting. So is that black CBP officer? Somebody comes up and says, I'm not going to move. The CBP officer takes his rifle, like his of course, heavily armed, takes it, puts it around his back, and just lunges at this guy's throat. And then 4 more officers come and take this guy out. So you've got an instance where this black CBP officer is doxed, it's not doxing, is identified as a fucking YouTuber. And that's what she said. She was like, oh my God, this guy's a fucking YouTuber. And then she is shot and their story doesn't hold up. And then what appears to be the aftermath of that is the same black officer assaulting somebody else in the neighborhood where they shot her.
Wow.
And she, as she describes, she was just out on an errand and she saw ICE, and that's why she started following them, because she, it was just like neighborhood watch.
Right.
So, so anyway, they shot her, and it's going to be another one of these cases where, because, like in DC, we're far enough in DC where the cases are really falling apart. Mm-hmm. Like DC has had to withdraw 11 cases, and there are close to 11 where they got no billed, where the grand jury said, no, fuck you.
Right.
Now, some of those overlap. So there's probably about 30 cases that have failed in DC, and they failed for reasons that, for like Fourth Amendment violations, for them being cases of assault, which were of assault on a claimed assault on an officer, which actually assault on somebody filming.
Right.
There are cases where the invasion by National Guard creates problems. Like one case was a charged assault against Mississippi National Guard, and defense attorneys were like, dudes, like these aren't federal officers. These are Mississippi National Guard working under the orders of Governor Tate. Mm-hmm. And so unless you're violating the Posse Comitatus Act, you've got no assault against national officers here. You're going to have the same problem in Portland and in Chicago. None of this takes away from the danger of the moment, but I do think, there was a poll out, Elliot Morris, I talk about his polling every week. By the way, he came out with a polling, like basically a replacement for 538, which is great. If you can support his work, please do. But he has a poll this morning saying that these invasions are not popular. The majority does not support them. I think there was one of the most interesting things this week is that Governor Stitt from Oklahoma, who is in charge of the National Governors Association, and Democratic governors were like, we're going to withdraw from this if you guys don't take a stand for 10th Amendment, for state solidarity. And so Governor Stitt yesterday came out against the invasion of Chicago by other National Guards. He's like, I'd go fucking nuts if Pritzker's National Guard came to invade Oklahoma. Right. This is not acceptable. And there are a few members of Congress who are also speaking up against these invasions by the National Guard. Meanwhile, there's a report that Stephen Miller, of course, wants to proclaim the Insurrection Act, and they're all saying, we don't think that the Supreme Court is going to go that far. So it is terrifying where we're at. And everyone I talk to in Chicago and Portland is like, the helicopters are driving me nuts, especially if you have kids, right? This nonstop surveillance of helicopters. If you do anything in either of those cities, like even if you're white, right? If you do anything in either of those cities that involves Latinos, like parts of your world have disappeared because Latinos are not going out in public. And so I don't want to minimize where we're at. So meanwhile, crazy Stephen Miller has gotten crazy Pam. So Pam Bondi goes to the Senate Judiciary Committee. Do you have the footage of that?
I do. I've got tons of it. So I don't.
The Sheldon Whitehouse one?
I've got a couple with Sheldon Whitehouse. You'll like this one, where he asks her about the $50,000 that
Senator,
Tom Homan
as
took.
Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche recently stated, the investigation of Mr. Homan was subjected to a full review by the FBI, agents, and DOJ prosecutors. They found no credible evidence of any wrongdoing.
And that was not my question. My question was, what became of the $50,000 in cash that the FBI delivered, evidently in a paper bag, to Mr. Homan?
Senator, I'd look at your facts.
What? I'd look at your facts?
Are you saying that they did not deliver $50,000 in cash to Mr. Homan?
Senator, as recently stated, the investigation of Mr. Homan was subjected to a full review
different question.
by the FBI agents,
That's a
by
different
Department
question.
of Justice prosecutors. They found no evidence of wrongdoing.
That's a different question. What became of the $50,000? Did the FBI get it back?
Mr. Whitehouse, excuse me, Senator Whitehouse, you're welcome to talk to the FBI.
The report to you, can't you answer this question?
Senator Whitehouse, you're welcome to discuss this with Director Patel.
Did Homan keep the $50,000?
As Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche recently stated, the investigation of Mr.
Never mind.
Holman
I can
was
see I'm not going to get a straight
full
answer from you.
She didn't answer a single question. In this instance, she actually, addressed the question he was asking with a non-answer, but usually she answered their questions with a prepackaged attack. Adam Schiff what he did was he started keeping track of all of the questions that she didn't answer throughout the hearing. And then, then she went to the ad hominems on him.
And you don't have to defer to the FBI director to pass the buck. So I'm asking you, will you support a request so that the committee, or indeed, I believe the American people should be able to see that video or audio tape? Will you support that request?
Oh, this was about the Tom Homan video.
Trump
So I
for
guess
trying to
the
impeach
answer
him
is you won't support that
after
request.
you now know that
So
Joe
let me-
Biden tried
let
to
me
cover up
do
Hunter
this.
Biden's involvement with
Excuse
Ukraine.
me. Let me do this, because I think it's valuable that the American people get a sense of what you've refused to answer today.
The other one.
So these are just some of the questions you refused to answer, or have answered with personal attacks on members of this committee. You were asked whether you consulted with career ethics lawyers, as you promised you would do during your nomination hearing, when you approved the president receiving a $400 million gift from the Qataris. You refused to answer that question. You were asked who or what role you may have played, or who played the role in asking that Trump's name be flagged in any of the Epstein documents gathered by the FBI. You refused to answer that question. You were asked whether Holman kept the $50,000 bribe money. You refused to answer that question. You were asked whether Holman paid taxes on the $50,000 bribe money. You refused to answer that question. You were asked, did career prosecutors find insufficient evidence to charge James Comey? You refused to answer that question. You were asked, how are military strikes on these boats in the Caribbean legal? And you refused to even answer that question.
You were asked, a law degree,
excuse
Senator
me.
Yeah, he does.
You were asked, did you discuss indicting James Comey with the president? You refused to answer that question. You were asked, did you approve the firing of antitrust lawyers who disagreed with the Hewlett-Packard merger? You refused to answer that question. You were asked whether you support a restoration fund for violent insurrections to attack the Capitol on January 6th. You refused to answer that question. You were asked whether you were firing career professionals, career prosecutors, just because they worked on January 6th investigations. You refused to answer that question. You were asked by my California colleague whether you believe government officials, like immigration officials, have to abide by court orders. You wouldn't even answer that question. This is supposed to be an oversight hearing.
Oversight?
Excuse me, you can attack me after my time is over.
You've attacked all of us, including President Trump, for your entire career.
You can attack me later, and I know you've got plenty of canned attacks. We've heard them all day to day.
Canned attacks on you?
This is supposed to be...
No one needs a canned attack on you.
Regular order, Madam Chair. I'm trying to speak. This is supposed to be an oversight hearing of the Justice Department. And it comes in the wake of an indictment called for by the president of one of his enemies. This is supposed to be an oversight hearing, and it comes in the wake of revelations that a top administration official took $50,000 in a bag, and this department made that investigation go away. This is supposed to be an oversight hearing when dozens of prosecutors have been fired simply because they worked on cases investigating the former president. This is, and now
what
the current president.
What about the fires in California?
And
Do you
this
care
is
about that,
supposed to
Senator
be,
Schiff?
this is, excuse me, this is supposed to be an oversight hearing in which members of Congress can get serious answers to serious questions about
the riots in LA serious?
About the cover-up of corruption, about the prosecution of the president's enemies. And
I think you owe the president an apology.
When will it be that the members of this committee on a bipartisan basis demand answers to those questions and refuse to accept
Clearly you're a failed lawyer because you don't understand when someone can and cannot answer a question.
Refuse to accept personal slander as an answer to those questions.
Personal slander? Will you apologize to Donald Trump for slandering him? Personal slander?
I had to turn it off. She was so horrible. I mean, I've never seen anything like that. I don't think that anybody has ever seen an attorney general at a Senate Judiciary Committee.
As contemptuous.
Yes.
And by the way, if people haven't seen it, the Reuters photographer got a picture of the canned. Do you have that too?
I do. Let me pull them up. I've got
the canned attacks that Pam Bondi had against White House and others. And in the White House case, this is sort of interesting. The White House case, she said, did you take money from Reid Hoffman, who had ties to Jeffrey Epstein? He's one of the 3 Democrats who did, as opposed to like Peter Thiel, who has even more substantial ties to Jeffrey Epstein. Did you take money from Jeffrey Epstein? And instead of asking the question, which is what her script said, she said, you took money from Reid Hoffman, which turned out to be false. And afterwards, both White House and Durbin, she made the attack against both of them. They came out and they said, no, wrong. So, one point I've made is that after lowering the bar to charge somebody for lying to SJC so low as to charge Jim Comey, it means that Kash Patel and Pam Bondi, if they ever get on the bad side of Donald Trump, which won't take much. Like now at this point, what will get you on the bad side of Donald Trump is not doing shit like Pam Bondi did in this hearing.
That's right.
Now they have to jump every time Stephen Miller says boo.
Right.
And they will. There was another story in the Minnesota Star Ledger or whatever that some a top aide to Pete Hegseth and a top aide getting signal texts from a top aide to Stephen Miller. And they talked about Kash Patel firing a bunch of FBI agents who took a knee during the George Floyd protests as an attempt to de-escalate. And the Stephen Miller said, well, this will keep him from losing his job, basically, but he's a giant douche canoe, or he said something like that, nobody likes Kash Patel. And Kash Patel has to continue to ratchet up the politicization of FBI to stay hired, particularly him, because they hired a babysitter for him and Dan Bongino, Andrew Bailey from Missouri, who is the same thing. He's this arch partisan right winger. And I promise you, Andrew Bailey expects to run FBI in December. He can run. He can act as director without having to go through confirmation hearings. And I presume that's the plan. And so Kash Patel, who started his tenure at FBI, desperately trying to get the approval of the big men that he has always wanted to be, is now just debasing himself and the agency, firing people every day. You put up the attack about the subpoenas.
Was that,
right before this hearing, Chuck Grassley released something from September 2023 showing that a couple FBI agents were reviewing the call records from 8 senators and 1 member of Congress. And these are people who were known to be in touch with Mike Roman and Rudy Giuliani.
Yep. This is the
and
one.
These are people who the January 6th committee had those records. Lindsey Graham was one of the 8 senators, and he had to testify to the grand jury in Georgia. And at the hearing, he was like, oh, my God, they spied on me. Josh Hawley was even more inflammatory. Josh Hawley, of course, incited the riot. Josh Hawley was in touch with a bunch of, Josh Hawley was one of the Congress who was most involved with the insurrection. And Josh Hawley's like, oh my God, they spied on me. And then Kyle Cheney from Politico was like, no, they actually got toll records. You're on the Judiciary Committee. You're a lawyer. You're a former attorney general. You should know this. And it was all this manufactured outrage over something very minor. They even went so far as saying, imagine if we got the toll records of Adam Schiff. And it's like, actually, you did in 2020. We know that. And that is why, that is the basis for which you are trying to investigate, trying to prosecute Adam Schiff. And you had no problem with Adam Schiff's toll records to be collected. And here you're, oh my God, so they fired people. They fired at least 2 FBI agents.
Wow.
For nothing other than getting legal toll records, which are considered one of the least intrusive ways of investigating. And they got those toll records in January 2021, not in September 2021. They got those toll records in September of 2023. So after Donald Trump had already been indicted, after the superseding indictment, there's very good reason to believe that Jack Smith was working on charging the people he thought he could charge, Rudy Giuliani, probably Mike Roman. My guess is, by the way, that Smith didn't do that because he learned the lesson from the Mueller investigation that if you indict Trump people, he'll bribe them with pardon, so you don't gain anything unless you actually get Trump. But nevertheless, this is September 2023. The record on their involvement, I mean, also came up in the impeachment. Like, the record on their involvement in this insurrection had been public for a year and a half, 2 years, and they're wailing as if like, oh my gosh, how did you, how dare you get toll records on me? It's like, dude, you're part of an insurrection on your workplace. The fact that you don't want the FBI to investigate that says more about you than about anybody else. So that's how they got through that hearing. It was disgusting. And one thing people should understand is Pam Bondi is desperate for her job. There was I think, Wall Street Journal article that talked about how secretly, that Wall Street Journal did confirm that Trump's text to Pam Bondi was accidental. He meant to send that privately. That's right. Which now confirms not only are they using Signal for everything, but they're using his social media website, which I'm sure is child's play to hack because it's not, it's not run by adults. And he's sending information to his cabinet members over it. And one of the things, like today,
you just froze.
We learned.
Okay, go ahead.
I know Tish James got indicted yesterday. We learned today that Lindsay, the insurance lawyer, Lindsay Halligan, did not alert Maine DOJ she was going to do that beforehand. Right. And what we learned from the LaMonica MacIver case is that Todd Blanche has replaced public integrity, which in the past you had to refer if you were going to indict somebody like the sitting attorney general from New York. And Halligan didn't do that. It's clear that Halligan is working for Eagle Ed Martin, who is this Gen Sixer himself. He's absolutely fucking nuts. He's never prosecuted a case. So you've got these two people who are rabid partisans who are deciding to charge all these people, and they're doing it without the supervision of Todd Blanche. And Ed Martin, Ed Martin went after the FBI agent, the first FBI agent, to respond to what's the elementary school in Connecticut?
Sandy Hook. Sandy Hook.
Sandy Hook, yeah. So he was the first FBI agent to respond to Sandy Hook. And in that context, he testified as the Sandy Hook parents sued Alex Jones. So this is about 2 weeks ago. Eagle Ed Martin starts investigating that FBI agent on behalf of Alex Jones. Todd Blanche finds out about it. He says stop. And now Ed Martin is spreading rumors that Todd Blanche is the deep state. So Ed Martin it is absolutely, chain of command problems out the U-Haul. He's doing things outside of Todd Blanche, and that is pressuring Bondi and Blanche, and that's how you end up seeing Bondi as insane as she is. And it is insane making. Like, I agree that everyone take time out and go stare at the mountains or stare at the ocean.
And I do have a question, though, or just another observation. Last night I read that Pete Hegseth has opened investigations into at least 300 service members who were critical of Charlie Kirk. Just for being critical of Charlie Kirk, they're under investigation.
Right. Yeah. And there's the story of Michael Bray, I think, who is trying to flee the country because TP USA has targeted him as Antifa.
Oh, God.
And then we had this ridiculous thing in the White House this week where Trump invited a bunch of conspiracy theorists. Trump invited the fucking Pizzagate guy into the White House.
Oh, my God.
To act as an expert on Antifa.
Oh, come on.
And there he said, so this is Jack Posobiec. Jack Posobiec, by the way, was colluding with Russian spies in 2017 to hack Emmanuel Macron. As I said, he's the guy behind the Pizzagate. So he got it's sort of, there's a very, and I will probably write this up if I don't take the time off I need to go stare at the ocean. But there's this parallel where in 2016, Jack Posobiec creates these conspiracy theories out of John Podesta's risotto recipe.
Right.
And it leads this guy in North Carolina who's mentally unbalanced to drive to D.C. and shoot up Comet Pizza. And now Posobiec is having the same effect on the president of the United States, who is equally unbalanced as that guy from North Carolina. And he literally said in this hearing in the White House, Antifa goes back 100 years. Meaning, right, he is saying that Antifa in Weimar are the same terrorists that Antifa is today, which is you can't get more Nazi than that.
Right. This whole thing is insane. Need we reiterate, there is no organization called Antifa. I know they're saying that the girlfriend of the founder of Antifa did something. What the hell are they talking about? So Antifa was fighting the Nazis in World War II because Antifa literally means anti-fascism. So, anybody who's against fascism is Antifa. There's no organization. There's no membership card. There's no headquarters. There's no founder. The whole thing is just insane. And Trump wants to designate Antifa as a terrorist group.
Yeah, including Invincible as a way to, like Mike Johnson today was targeting the No Kings protests. But, I think that doing this will give No Kings an opportunity to get an injunction to say this is free speech and this is prior restraint. To have the Speaker of the House say peaceful protesters can't speak up against authoritarianism is prior restraint of the kind that Jim Jordan has fought against for years.
This is Mike Johnson talking about the No Kings protests that are coming up a week from tomorrow.
Season because of this nonsense, and we're so angry about it. I mean, I'm a very patient guy, but I have had it with these people. They're playing games with real people's lives. The theory we have right now, they have a Hate America rally that's scheduled for October 18th on the National Mall. It's all the pro-Hamas wing and the Antifa people. They're all coming out. Some of the House Democrats are selling T-shirts for the event, and it's being told to us that they won't be able to reopen the government until after that rally because they can't face their rabid base. I mean, this is serious business hurting real people. And I'm beyond words. I can't believe
I'm beyond words. These are the pro-Hamas Antifa people, the Hate America rally. Are you fucking kidding me? That's dangerous. And that's the fucking Speaker of the House.
Right, but I do think, it is dangerous, but I also do think that this creates a harm that now Invincible can go...
Indivisible?
Indivisible, yeah, sorry. Can go try and do something about, because this is prior restraint against people who had a peaceful protest in July that went off without a hitch, without any kind of violence whatsoever.
None at all.
And so, it is. I think that the intensity is a sense of. now let's go to the shutdown.
Okay.
One of the things that's interesting, like the other day, 2 days ago, I was like, okay, I want to write, I've been meaning to write a piece about the shutdown, which I haven't done yet. And I was like, let's see what's actually being reported. And admittedly, it was after the alleged Gaza peace deal. And so 90% of the news was focused on that. But you couldn't find it. Like, you couldn't find any report of the shutdown. You could in Washington Post, but most of what Washington Post was focusing on is which like marathons are being canceled, which parks are being canceled, how is it affecting travelers? And you could also find it in Politico, which is like the best place to cover the shutdown. But you couldn't find it in New York Times at all, Wow. You couldn't find it. You had to really look on Wall Street Journal. There was one article on Wall Street Journal about how Republicans don't want Trump to cut things. And as a result, we are going to get to next week where the military is going to miss a paycheck.
Yeah.
And much of the main thing that is getting covered in the press is slowdowns with air traffic control.
Yes.
And like historically, when air traffic control slows down, that's when people decide to deal. That is the primary thing that's getting focused. Also, people going to parks and finding like piles of shit that Trump chose to keep parks open but not clean them, and so there's piles of shit stacking up all over the parks. But which is a metaphor for Donald Trump, I think. But all that Sean Duffy is doing with ATF is saying you've got to go to work, and it's like, dude, you've been a fucking asshole to ATF from the start. Like, just telling them they have to go to work when they know you're already shorthanded, and if you start firing them, it will have the counter effect of what you actually want it to have, is going to backfire. And that's like today, as we were on, Russ Vought has said, okay, the firings are about to start. And Republicans have said to Trump, don't do these firings. 1, because they're illegal. 2, because they're going to backfire. 3, because, this gives those people you fire with legal cause. 4, because it's not funded. Because to fire people, you have to give them severance, and Congress hasn't fired. That hasn't. So there was a report in Politico the other day, and basically it was Republicans in disarray. Because if you look at polling, Democrats are at least 10 points better on this than Republicans. People are blaming Trump, particularly if you ask, do you blame Trump and the Republicans rather than do you just blame the Republicans? So people are blaming Trump. But to pressure Democrats in the media outlets that Republicans would normally use, which is places like Shitter and Politico, you would need there to be attention on them. You would need the attention in like CNN and MSNBC and New York Times and Washington Post to be relentlessly focused on the shutdown. And instead of being focused on the shutdown, it's focused on the invasion of Portland and Chicago and the indictments of Comey and Letitia James. And so Trump's own authoritarianism is sucking the air out, the air out of political pressure Republicans would like to push onto Democrats. There is pain being felt, but this has delayed the moment where, and I think when the military has to go without paychecks is going to be one of them. But one of the things to remember about these deployments of National Guard to the border, but also to Chicago, is they're not getting paid because of the shutdown. These guards people are not getting paid. So not only, like, normally the ones who were deployed to DC, for example, they were being uprooted from their homes, family, and jobs, because they mostly have jobs, and sent to DC, and they weren't being paid properly, but at least they were still being paid. Now they're not getting paid. They're working for free. There was a picture of some Texas National Guard who were unloading in Chicago. Most of them were Latino, and I was like, how's that going to work out? Oh my God. And how is like Latinos are already turning against Donald Trump, which in Texas, like, that's where Trump has prevented Texas from turning blue recently, is increasing gains among Latinos. And if they lose that Latino edge, then, all the redistricting in Texas might backfire.
Please.
But what's going on is, I mean, first of all, much as you hate that that Democrats have focused on health insurance, right, on ACA, it's working.
Yeah.
Right. It's not working it isn't educating the public about Russ Vought's authoritarianism as much as you'd like. But Trump is doing that anyway. The invasions of Chicago and Portland are doing that anyway. But it is working from the standpoint of, and this is something people really, really, really need to remember. Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries' job is different than J.B. Pritzker's and Gavin Newsom's job. Much as you'd like to say Hakeem Jeffries should be leading the fight, J.B. Pritzker is the one withstanding to make this fight. He needs to be the one leading the fight. Whereas Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer, their means of leverage against their colleagues is places like Politico, which you're probably not reading anyway.
Right.
And the healthcare is working out. People, now there are three things that are increasing the pressure. One is the military is not getting paid. Two is many states have already begun to send out their new ACA rates, which are, people are showing these 300% increases, which led Marjorie Taylor Greene to come out in favor of ACA subsidies.
Yep.
And there's one more, which I'll remember in a second. But the ACA subsidies, there's a group of people, you could put together 60 people in the Senate to pass ACA subsidies on a continuing resolution. In the House, Mike Johnson has refused to even consider it.
Of course.
Now, you could probably put together 218 in the House, but it wouldn't involve most Republicans, because most Republicans in the House are opposed to ACA subsidies. And that has led to a difference in negotiation with John Thune and people like Susan Collins in the Senate and the House. And that's important because I want to go back to March, right? Like one of the things that happened in March is most smart people, and then people like me who aren't as smart, believed that it was not going to be possible for Johnson and Thune to get the lockstep support for that continuing resolution. And that's one of the reasons why Schumer was caught flat-footed. Doesn't excuse his messaging failures. I do think that Chuck Schumer's logic for letting Republicans vote for the continuing resolution actually stood up better than most people get. But nobody expected the Spanish Inquisition, sort of like nobody expected Johnson, like Republicans in the House had never ever been able to pass a continuing resolution without Democratic help.
Right.
And so everyone thought that he was going to fail, and he didn't. And so since then, he's been able to keep a very narrow caucus in line, mostly because everything he does is at the beck and call of Donald Trump.
Right.
But that now we're seeing the interests of Congress and Trump split. We're also seeing, by the way, some states that Trump has ordered to do redistricting say, no, we're not going to do that. Like Indiana so far has resisted doing that, and J.D. Vance is on his second trip out there to try and convince them to do that. But you've got people in the Senate, Republicans in the Senate, who really do want to pass ACA extensions of some sort. You've got people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who, this doesn't get discussed enough, but one of the reasons Marjorie Taylor Greene is speaking up is because the powers that be in Georgia were like, no fucking way, you can't run at a statewide office, you can't run for governor, you can't run for senator. And so she's pissed. And then she, it's not surprising she backed the Epstein stuff, that she joined Tom Massey in trying to release the Epstein files, because she was always, that's consistent with her populism. But now coming out in favor of ACA subsidies because her kids can't afford to pay for their increases is a huge break. And the break is that, a bunch of old white men are telling Marjorie Taylor Greene to shut up and sit down, little lady, and she's not taking it very well. So and the other thing that's going on, right, is partly because he is completely beholden to Donald Trump, Mike Johnson has chosen not to show up to work. Also, by not showing up to work, we say this every week, Adelita Grijalva, who has won, has not been sworn in yet. She is the 218th vote for the dispatch petition for the Epstein files. And so Mike Johnson is trying to refuse, like he won't go back to work. I saw analysis today that said one of the reasons he has basically sent the House on vacation while people are going without a paycheck is because he realizes if he's in town, he's going to face pressure. And so he's hiding. And he now, yesterday, the Senate passed the defense authorization. I mean, one of the things that's not being talked about enough is the entire logic of the continuing resolution is pass this short continuing resolution so we can negotiate the actual budget. Right. That's been missed. But how are you going to negotiate the actual budget if you refuse to come back to Washington?
Right.
And that is the stance of Mike Johnson. Now, the Senate did pass the defense authorization, so the House is going to have to come back and deal with that. Then we're going to have to swear in Adelita Grijalva. And I'm not saying that the shutdown has yet become a rallying cry against Trump's authoritarianism, though Trump's authoritarianism has had the effect of taking the political pressure off Democrats in Congress, because all the focus, again, is on these invasions and on, and on these indictments. And, but the healthcare component, unless people like Jeanne Shaheen capitulates in the Senate, and she might, Jeanne Shaheen is one of the key players in the Senate who might capitulate, Tim Kaine, whatever. But if that doesn't happen, then you're going to have more people getting these ACA increases. You're going to have the pressure of the defense people. You're going to have a few more things really up the pressure on Trump to reopen government. Now, as I said, they're talking about rescissions. They're talking about doing all the things that Republicans in Congress are saying, don't do that. That's going to make it harder for us. When this started, and there was some confusion about this, because remember, this continuing resolution was the first day of the fiscal year, which starts October 1st.
That's right. Yeah.
And so Russ Vought had cut some things and people thought it was connected with the shutdown, including the tunnel to New York.
Yep.
And including a bunch of energy projects that included stuff that Republicans really want. Overnight, Vought and Department of Energy cut this enormous solar project in Nevada that would provide more energy than, would make the Hoover Dam look like a pebble. And of course, with less water coming down the Colorado River, you need that. So just canceled it. It's an enormous amount of energy. Nevada it's a swing state. Mm-hmm. And so, I think those things are going to become really unpopular in a way, again, that they were happening in March, but they weren't visible in March, and they are visible now. And we don't know how it's going to turn out, but I just think that Trump's fascism is sucking up all the energy. The normal means by which Republicans would pressure Democrats, Shitter and the mainstream press are partly focusing on the fascism, but partly those aren't the main. That's not TikTok. Like they're not using TikTok to pressure Democrats, but also reality is getting in the way of their efforts to pressure Democrats. And, I do think that Democrats are remarkably well poised. However much you hate Schumer and Jeffries, now they're upping the ante and they're saying, the reason why you cut this healthcare is to give Elon Musk a tax break. Right. And so now they're putting the full import of the big ugly bill on the table when originally it was just the healthcare component. And again, like if the more that Democrats can either be or play populist to Americans as things start shutting down, the stronger it positions them politically. So we don't know how it's going to happen. The moderates in the Senate could capitulate, but right now, Democrats are remarkably well positioned for this shutdown to work in ways that people really hoped it might.
Right, but there was also something today about the Republicans are taking a segment of a Chuck Schumer quote, misquoting him. They're repeating it, I guess, in their talking points, where Schumer said every day gets better for us. But the full quote, and saying, see, the Democrats wanted the shutdown because they think it'll be politically beneficial to them. But the full quote was, every day gets better for us. It's because we've thought about this long in advance, and we know that healthcare would be the focal point on September 30th, and we prepared for it. Their whole theory was threaten us, bamboozle us, and we would submit in a day or two. They cut off everything except the every day gets better for us. But that's
right. But they've been trying that every day.
Yeah.
And it's not like shitter mobilizes the base, but it's a shrinking base.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Right. And it's not the base that you need to leverage a shutdown. That's sort of what I mean by the air is falling out of their means of pressuring. Like, it's the same, honestly, it's the reverse of what happened to Kamala Harris last year. She didn't have the means, like the way the media, and frankly, the way in which people have missed some things that Democrats in Congress have done. The media is fractured.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And as a result of that fracture, the way in which the media worked as recently as a year and a half ago no longer works that way. And so people in DC who expect to get by on false outrage like that, like the quoting Chuck Schumer out of context, it's not working. Like, repeating false claims on shitter is not working in the way that it did 2 years ago. And that's one of the things that, plus again, Trump is filling the news with a focus on his authoritarianism.
Right. That too. Right. No, and I think people are finally, they're getting the message. They know what he's doing, and there's a lot of regret about, this isn't what I voted for. But then, I'll tell you what's really depressing. So I wound up in the emergency room the other night because I have this thing on my elbow, and we're talking, the woman who's taking my blood, we were talking about my husband and I both got the COVID and the flu vaccines at the same time a couple of weeks ago, and I'm still having, my arm is still red from it. Anyway, she said, I only get one of those, and she was just being kind of cagey about it, and I know what she was saying. I said, "So what? Are you a Bobby Kennedy fan? Are you believing the stuff he's saying?" And she said, "I don't do politics." And I went, "Okay." And David said, my husband said, "Did you vote?" And she said, "I don't vote. I don't do politics. I don't talk politics." And I bit my tongue. I mean, normally I would have gone off on her. I had a Uber driver once who, before the election, who said she didn't vote, and the whole rest of the drive, I'm trying to tell her why she needed to vote. But there are still those people out there, and I just so wanted to educate her, but I didn't. I should have. I think I should have.
Yeah.
Yeah. So. Well. Yeah. But there I was in the emergency room, and I didn't want to get into it with it. Actually, she wasn't even a nurse. She was a phlebotomist. She was a tech. But whatever. They are out there, and I think it's up to us to we got to talk to people like that. I regret not calling her out on it. So. That's the other thing we need to do. Unplug, but still, we got to do our part to let people. She's got to see it every day working in a hospital, but oh well, here we are. So, Marcy, anything else? We didn't get to the Nobel Peace Prize was awarded today to Maria Corina Machado, a Venezuelan opposition leader who actually, thanked Donald Trump for supporting her and I guess being anti-Maduro, but maybe that would assuage his.
Guess who recommended her for the Peace Prize a year and a couple months ago?
I don't know. Trump.
Marco Rubio.
Oh God. Okay.
There were a bunch of significantly Florida members of Congress who recommended her.
Okay.
So, so I posted it on Blue. I posted a link to the, yeah. So point is that like, everyone's like, oh, why didn't, and to be fair, like, I think that I think that I think that if Trump conducted regime change in Venezuela, she'd probably be in charge. So there's that reason to reach out, and also to reach out and try and mitigate any outrage that. And by the way, Scott Bessent, I always call him Todd again every week.
Scott Bessent.
He did roll out the bailout of Argentina yesterday. So, and New York Times has a story about the hedgies, his buddies in New York, that the billionaires that are actually being bailed out with this. The other thing to keep your eye on this week, China is really ratcheting things up. Right. So China has gotten through a year without purchasing any soybeans, and they know that soybeans are a real issue right now for Trump. China has also imposed a kind of export control on the metals that go into chips.
Okay.
And this could have really devastating effects for the entire electronics industry. They basically are saying if the end result of a product is something 0.00 coming from our materials, we need an export license. And this is a like really astounding ratcheting up of the trade war. Okay. Then in response to that, Trump said, I'm not going to meet with Xi. And then China also said, if you come to our ports, we're going to impose a duty on your ports. And so what China has done is Trump's at a very weak position in this trade war anyway. And what China has done is say, unless you get rid of the tariffs altogether, we are going to basically take your balls and ratchet them. And that's happening. Like the EU is thinking about retaliating more against the tariffs. Trump is trying to change the terms of the tariffs in the EU to both change our farm rules, our ag rules, but also more importantly, and this has always been the goal, our social media rules, so that they can start poisoning Europe with their Nazi rhetoric. And remember that the hearing for the tariffs is mid-November in the Supreme Court. And so this is all happening as the possibility that the tariffs are just going to disappear. And meanwhile, of course, Trump, this is the other pressure issue on the shutdown. Trump is trying to find a way to say he's going to bail out the farmers. Yeah. Now, most people realize that he has killed the soybean industry. He's killed the soybean market because China's just replaced it with South American markets, right? And this also goes to the Argentina bailout because they, of course, poached the remainder of our market. So it's Brazil, which Trump is trying to isolate, and instead, and China, it's like this is just in the last 24 hours, China has really ratcheted up their pressure on the United States. And ultimately, what they're going to ask for is Trump to cede Taiwan and also no tariffs. And the question is, how desperate does Donald Trump get? He just doesn't know. He doesn't know how to negotiate. He doesn't. I mean, that's the problem with the shutdown. That's the problem with his trade deals. He doesn't know how to negotiate. He expects obeisance, and China's not going to give that. Like China is in a position. Trump has done so much to strengthen China in the last 9 months, and they're in a. I assume they're in a position now where they're like, okay, well, you've empowered us this far. Let's consolidate the power you have given us. And that's, again, the press, as we started, it's like everything is so overwhelming and there are so many stories and the real stories are getting buried under other real stories, that it's really hard, even if you are making a concerted effort to find little grasps of reality out there. But underlying that all, there's a lot of pressure in places that people are not really seeing, and the China ratcheting up is one of them.
Right. And now, you see Trump saying, well, maybe we will make a deal on health care, he may have to cave because things are not going well for him, not going well for the American people right now. We shall see.
Right.
All right. Well, Marcy Wheeler, I hope you do get out and go look at the ocean. That's the one thing that I really miss about Florida is having the ocean and the beach. But I'll go look at mountains or something, big cactuses. Oh, nope, I'll be packing because we're moving over the next few weeks. Never ends. So have a great weekend. I'll be back Monday. We'll see you next Friday. Marcy Wheeler, find her at emptywheel.net on Blue Sky, and check her out on Shitter too if you go there, because she takes on the idiots who congregate there still. All right. Thank you. We'll see you later.
All right, have a good week.
You too. Peace out. Bye.